Check it out, Casper!
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Casper here, and on the 17th of January 2017, Gabe Newell did an Ask Me Anything thread on Reddit, where members of the community could ask questions directly to Gabe Newell, and him and a bunch of other Valve employees answered these questions. Obviously there was a lot of questions about Valve and Steam and some of their other games, but there were quite a few really interesting things which came out about Team Fortress 2, which we genuinely didn't know until this thread existed. A lot of the Team Fortress 2 based questions were answered by a guy going by the alias Dave Riller, who works at Valve. And one of the most interesting questions that he answered from our perspective as Team Fortress fans was about how many people actually work on the Team Fortress team. He confirms that there's actually currently 16 members of staff working on Team Fortress 2. Now it's quite well known that Valve staff aren't fixed to particular teams. So right now there's 16, but let's just say 3 of those people might want to work on Dota next week. Or another 6 people might want to work on Team Fortress 2. So that number will always be changing, but it's very reassuring to know that the number is that high. It's often referred to as being less than 10 or even 5 or 3 people are working on Team Fortress 2. So it is really good to know that there is actually quite a lot, and that number could potentially be higher and it'll sometimes be a bit lower. In the same answer, D. Riller also mentioned what's going to happen for Team Fortress 2's anniversary. They say that they've got a lot that they're excited about to put into the community's hands, but obviously they can't guarantee what day and date that's going to come on, which is fair enough. Sticking with the theme of updates, another question was actually more general about what plans are for Team Fortress 2 and how Valve views Team Fortress 2. And they confirm what we kind of already know, that they're working on the next major update, which they confirm is going to have a campaign, which we weren't 100% sure on before. Obviously the Pyro class pack, more matchmaking improvements, and other balance improvements, which is of course a great thing. Even though this game isn't as dynamic as a game like Overwatch with 20 odd classes, or a MOBA where there's a million heroes, there is still a lot of weapons, and regular balance changes are just part of the flow of the game. There's also a very reassuring paragraph just before this in the answer with regards to Valve's general approach to Team Fortress 2, where they say that the team is staffed by a group of people who love and play the game, who are committed to supporting and growing Team Fortress 2 with new features, content and player experiences. To read this actually, written by an actual Valve employee, is such an incredible thing for us, because you are constantly seeing YouTube videos, Reddit threads, Steam threads of people saying that Team Fortress 2 is dead, Team Fortress 2 is dying, and more specifically that Valve doesn't care about Team Fortress 2 anymore. Well, right here, Valve are telling us they do care, and in fact, right now there's 16 people at Valve who care and love this game and they're committed to this game. And even though Valve are pretty poor at communicating with us, when we do get these glimpses, it really does help to reassure that despite the mistakes or errors or disappointment that we feel as a community, actually, we're probably just being a little bit of a babies. In fact, on the topic of communication, another Redditor does ask Valve generally about communicating with us. Unfortunately, they give the regular reply of, "We're not too good at communicating," without really saying that they're going to change that. But they do mention that there's an upcoming blog post where they're going to talk about what they're planning for the next update, the one I just mentioned, the Pyro Pack, so on. But they also say that they're going to be taking community feedback prior to this release. And that's great, because we know that at least right now there's 16 people who are working on Team Fortress 2. Not all of those are going to be people who do with the balances. Let's just say there's 5 of those guys that are working on actual programming weapons. That's only 5 people. And there's millions, literally millions of people who play Team Fortress 2. Not all at the same time, but that's millions of opinions. And it's impossible for 5 people to take that into account. It's impossible for those 5 people to actually have the same experiences that all these different millions of people who play the game feel. So they'll do their best judgment at making these changes, they'll propose them, and then they'll somehow collect the community feedback, be that from YouTube videos that they watch potentially, I don't know, from Reddit threads, from Steam forums, maybe they'll have some sort of in-game feedback collection. Ultimately, we just got to wait for this blog post, and then we'll take it from there. And the final question, which was really heavily related to Team Fortress 2, was about tournaments. And the answer here is really good. I suggest you read the whole thing. But just to paraphrase it for you, D. Riller at Valve essentially explains that up until recently, they always saw that the competitive players and the casual players were 2 separate markets of players, which is fair enough, because that is how they act in the community. So Valve were trying to please both separately. They were putting out updates to suit competitive people and then separate updates to suit casual people. And this is never going to work long term, which is why they can't support tournaments, because essentially they'd have to support a tournament on a game which they didn't design. So what Valve are essentially trying to do, and what D. Riller heavily implies here in his comments, is they're going to balance the game in a way which suits everyone, which is going to be difficult. But essentially, they're going to modify potentially what they consider the primary competitive mode in as much as they can without ruining the charm of the game for either side of the argument, casual players or competitive players. And of course, they reference CSGO and Dota. The casual players of CSGO play a very similar game to the competitive players. Okay, casual mode might be 10 versus 10 or whatever, but there's no weapon restrictions, there's no class restrictions, you've got all the same items, all the same maps, pretty much the same rule set. I don't actually play Dota, so I can't confirm whether that's the same there, but I'd imagine it's pretty similar. Team Fortress 2, on the other hand, casual mode is entirely different to the way the competitive mode is played. Competitive introduces weapon restrictions, completely separate rule sets, class restrictions, and generally has a completely different metagame to how a casual match would play out. Now obviously this would be confusing to spectators who aren't familiar with both formats, and totally fair enough in my opinion that Valve do want to join these two up and make it so that the casual game is like a more relaxed version of the competitive game, or vice versa. Not what they are currently, where competitive is almost like a mod for casual Team Fortress 2, which has got custom rules and weapons and so on. So those are all the big questions which were asked and answered that I could see in this thread. If you've spotted anything else, please let me know. Leave a link, if you can, to the actual question in the comments, and I'll check that out. And of course, anyone else who sees that comment can also check it out. So thanks everyone for watching. I hope you found that as interesting as I did, and I'll see you all very soon.
Someone told me I'm precious. If that ain't fair, I don't